Controversy over Chinese activist Chen Guangcheng continues to highlight some tensions between the two nations. In the latest development, Chen has been offered a fellowship at NYU, and his family would be allowed to leave China with him. An NYU law professor says the offer is in fact from the university, and the State Department says it expects the Chinese government will approve the required travel documents. Joining me now to discuss the controversy, Jamie Metzl, the Executive Vice President of the Asia Society. Jamie, welcome back to Bottom Line. Always a pleasure to have you.
Thanks. Happy to be here.
Did diplomacy between the U.S. and China suffer because of this incident?
I don't think so. I mean, we know that there are divisions between the United States on issues regarding human rights. While the Chinese government has been critical of the actions of the American government, this was a big problem. Everybody stood by their principles. The United States, I think, treated Chen Guangcheng relatively well and fairly, and the outcome is a good one. But the big challenge is, what does this mean for China in the long term? Not just this case, but what's the story of China's reform prospects?
Talk to me about the economics of diplomacy. According to data compiled by Bloomberg, China now holds $1.8 trillion of U.S. government debt. Is that enough of an incentive to keep U.S.-Chinese relations on track?
Well, it's mutual dependence. Yes, the United States, we owe them a lot of money, but they are hugely dependent on us for the future of their economy. So one of the key issues is our societies, our economies are interdependent. We can't ignore one another. We have to respect one another, but that doesn't mean that we can't have differences. We do have differences, including of values, as this case demonstrates.
A top-level Chinese official was speaking to reporters, and he said that human rights issues should not be used as an excuse to interfere in the internal affairs but other countries. But how can the United States not raise such an issue when it comes up?
Yeah, well, the United States, human rights, universal rights, these are part of what it means not only to be an American, but to be a human being. The Universal Declaration of Human Rights is not an American document, it's an international document. Our belief is that all people deserve these rights, and in this particular case, China, in my own personal view, should recognize that they need people like Chen Guangcheng to be raising the fundamental problems that China is facing in order for them to go through the reform process that the country needs.
And we should mention that Mr. Chen raised the ire of Chinese authorities because he was trying to prevent forced sterilizations and abortions in his village.
Right. It was that, and there were issues of people who've been infected with HIV, AIDS, tainted blood. Yeah. And there you see these stories of these problems that are happening over and over and over again in China. And it raises the question, how can this be cleaned up? The Chinese government's answer is, well, the government can police itself. But what really we're seeing is they need people like Chen who can hold the government accountable, and that's what they're uncomfortable with.
You talked about the interdependency issue, and Secretary of Clinton used that word. She said the United States and China are, in her words, thoroughly, inescapably independent. How does that translate into cooperation on issues such as trade, currency valuation, and, as many people have said, including Secretary Geithner, the need to rely on more domestic consumption by the Chinese?
Yeah, well, our economies are interdependent and interconnected, but that doesn't mean that we think China should do whatever. And the United States has major concerns on the value of the Chinese currency, the RMB, on China's very poor record of intellectual property protection, on access to the Chinese market, what they call indigenous innovation. And these are big, big issues because we are so interdependent. What China does domestically has huge implications for the United States, just as what the United States does domestically has huge implications for China.
Jamie, I have to ask you quickly in about 15 seconds. Are you surprised that this situation was resolved so quickly? Because Sino-American relations have this history of tensions over human rights.
Right. I'm not surprised that it's been resolved this quickly, because as important as human rights issues are, as important as this individual case is, the United States and China need to work together on big, big global issues, and that's what I think we're beginning to do.
Jamie Metzl, Executive Vice President of the Asia Society, joining me on set. Always a pleasure to see you again.
My great pleasure,
Thank
Mark.
you so much.